We have covered, right, the definition of harsh speech, motivations, and why we should avoid harsh speech, right? So now today we are going to talk about how to reduce harsh speech. And this is a very important topic. But before I move on, can I just ask you all, do you still remember what is the definition? Yeah? So as long as your words are rough, hard, hurtful to others, offensive to others, provoking anger, unconducive to concentration, it is harsh speech. It does not matter that you are not shouting or raising your voice. Right? Today is how. Now, the Buddha said this about all the other unwholesome deeds like false speech and sexual misconduct. Why do we have so many people doing the wrong thing and so few doing the right thing? Firstly, they do not know a better way of doing things. Secondly, it is not easy to do the right thing. You all know, right, how difficult it is to stop ourselves from scolding our children, to refrain from retaliation when we are verbally attacked, and to remain calm when we do not get what we want. And why is that? Because we see this body as mine, I, and self. It is the same for feelings, perception, meaning that we often cling to our views and we get upset when others do not agree with us. Mental formations. This includes our motivations or intentions. When it's like how we perceive things determines how we relate to them, which actually shapes our intentions. We make karma here through the wholesome and unwholesome intentions. And then we have consciousness, which is our awareness through the six sense bases. These five aggregates, right, make up our mind and body. We are just body, feelings, perception, mental formation, and consciousness, right? We are just four parts mind and one part body. But because of our ego, we take things very personally, and all our needs and unmet needs stemmed from the sense of self. Behind all our actions, including harsh speech, we will find either self-importance, self-interest, self-righteousness, and even self-denial. Now, this sense of self will keep interfering with our attempts to exercise restraint. So it is not possible to change overnight. We need to develop these skills for right speech slowly and patiently. So how do we reduce harsh speech? When we want to improve our verbal communication with others, we naturally think of ways to improve what we say. But we sometimes forget, isn't it, that listening is the other half of communication and equation. We speak while others listen, and we listen while others speak. But because the I, mine, and self reign supreme, our conversation with another person is ultimately still about ourselves. Sometimes when others are talking, we make sure that we are interested to hear what the other person is saying, but we are just waiting for the opportunity to interrupt, so we say what we want. Remember this slide from last week? A conversation between husband and wife, which did not end well, just over household chores. We hear others, but we may not be listening. Instead, we listen only to our own needs and acknowledge only our own judgment of others. So when we act to fulfill our needs or to express unmet needs, harsh speech can arise very easily because there is no room for empathy in our minds. We have to start reducing harsh speech by listening first. We shall call it right listening or mindful listening. Mindful listening means being genuinely interested in what other person is saying. Mindful listening keeps us in the present moment, which means listening and not thinking what you are going to say next, because that is a concern in the future. And since our response will be based on what you know of the person and situation, that will be something from the past. Mindful listening is not something we just do and don't need to think about. Mindful listening is a skill to be acquired. And mindful listening is what the Buddha meant when he told his audience this before teaching the Dhamma. Correct? So you are mindfully listening to me now, but if your mind is somewhere else, your mind is outside your house. And mindful listening is what the Buddha meant when he told his audience, right, that your mind has to be at the present moment. Now, number 2 here, do not judge. This is particularly challenging when you are having a very difficult conversation where you anticipate hearing something bad about yourself. We have to be aware of our mental state, know what it is, and let it go. Then can we be non-judgmental? That is metta. And do not decide whether a person is right or wrong, good or bad, because judgments that imply wrongness in others causes ill will. And other negativities in you can trigger harsh speech already. So when a person says no or don't want, that's just an unskillful way of letting us know what his needs really are. What we should try to discern behind the words is how he or she feels at that moment and what he or she would have liked to make life better. That means we do not just listen to the story, we hear the meaning behind the story. Now, and remember, verbal communication is not confined to spoken words and, written communication. It also includes the tone of your voice, facial expression, and gestures. For example, passive-aggressive person may express his anger or displeasure in a very roundabout way, often with some degree of veiled hostility, while verbally maintaining that all is well. For example, agreeing to do something and then silently sulk to show displeasure, or agreeing to do a chore and conveniently forget to follow through. Or he does it so poorly that you will not ask him again. So expressions in behavior and not spoken words. That is also communication. Look for needs behind such behavior. For example, concerns underlying the position or word spoken. We will look at this in more detail in the last 2 talks of the Right Speech series under the Doing Good part of Right Speech towards the end of the year. In summary, we listen mindfully to really hear the other person's observations, feelings, needs, and requests, whether it is through verbal or non-verbal cues. And we do not judge. This helps us cultivate empathy, compassion, and kindness, which is needed for other important part of effective communication, which is connecting with others in a way that allows both parties to contribute to one another's well-being. Now, to do that, we have to create the right conditions. We learn to express our own need, and we also train ourselves to hear the needs of the other person. This is achieved with mindful listening, right? Mindful listening, then it's easier for you to have empathy. Empathy is the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing from their point of view, but not feeling what they feel, and that's sympathy. Empathizing is at the heart of listening. Only then can we move on to look for strategies or solutions that will satisfy both parties. When we present strategies, we have to do it in a respectful and non-demanding manner, right? Doing that means that after you make our request, your request, no matter how the other person responds, whether that person says yes or no, we still give an equal amount of respect and understanding. If they say no, try to understand what are the needs that keep them from saying yes. In the same way, when we listen and give empathy, it does not mean that we must do what the other person wants. In short, connecting positively means not benefiting at the other person's expense, but not giving up on our own needs either. Now, remember this slide, this dialogue, okay? So if they do mindful listening and both parties understand the definition of harsh speech, the conversation will go something like this. Would you mind rinsing the breakfast dishes in the sink and putting them in the dishwasher? I'll do it in a while. I'll appreciate your doing it now though. Looking at them really bothers me. I'm right in the middle of something. If it's bothering you, maybe you can wash them now and I'll do the dinner dishes. In this dialogue, the couple stated clearly and truthfully what they wanted without insulting each other. Wife expressed what bothered her without finding fault with the husband. Husband responded in a way that showed he respected the wife's feelings and that he did not expect her to clean up after him. At the same time, expressing his own needs that prevents him from helping her immediately. As you can see, harsh speech often results from ineffective communication. With effective communication, we refrain from using harsh speech against another first and using harsh speech in retaliation. You see, the moment there's a retaliation, two hands clap, there's a quarrel. Now, which one is more difficult to exercise? Number one or number two? Number two, right? Retaliation. Why? Because when someone speaks harshly to us, we perceive that as a lack of respect, understanding, or basic courtesy. So this self, this ego cannot take it. Now, how did the Buddha handle this? Buddha and his monks had a lot of harsh speech directed at them. Brahmins often called the Buddhist monks shaven, menial ascetics, or call them the scourings from Brahmin's foot. Now, the Brahmins were supposed to be, the Brahma god, was supposed to have created the lower caste, the slaves, from his feet. So scouring means the refuse that remains after cleaning grain, dregs, and scum. So this is a big insult. A Brahmin even referred to some nuns, Buddhist nuns, as shaven-headed horse. Despite being frequently subjected to such verbal abuse, the Buddha never retaliated in the same way. So what did the Buddha teach regarding retaliation to anger or harsh speech? Now, once a Brahmin approached the Buddha and abused him with rude, harsh words. When he finished speaking, the Buddha said to him, "What do you think, Brahmin? Do your friends and colleagues, kinsmen and relatives, as well as guests, come to visit you?" "Sometimes they come to visit." "Do you then offer them some food or a meal or a snack?" "Sometimes I do." "But if they do not accept it from you, then to whom does the food belong?" "If they do not accept it from me, then the food still belongs to me." So too, Brahmin, we who do not abuse anyone, who do not scold anyone, who do not rail against anyone, refuse to accept from you the abuse and scolding and tirade you let loose at us. It still belongs to you, Brahmin. The Buddha explained that one who abuses his own abuser, who scolds the one who scolds him, is said to partake of the meal, to enter upon exchange. So when a person speaks harshly to you, he creates unwholesome karma. When you react in a similar fashion, you partake of the same unwholesome karma. So not only does retaliation will never help to settle conflicts, our intention in retaliation is not to communicate at all, is it not? But rather to punish the other person and to satisfy our ego and give us relief from the pain that the other person is causing us. By retaliation, we are not being taken advantage of. We are protecting the mind. Now, ill will forms the basics of most situations involving harsh speech. In this discourse to a cowherd, the Buddha said that in confronting ill will in the mind, we must recognize it, abandon it, remove it. If we do not, then ill will can rapidly be one unskillful speech or action. How do we do all that? Remember this? Remember the 5 points? So we have seen these 5 points, how they help us exercise restraint from false speech and divisive speech, and also idle chatter. Similarly, this also applies to harsh speech. For the techniques on skillful speech, we will cover those towards the end of the year under the doing good part. We have to remember to pause for 10 seconds before we speak. This is the advice from Ajahn Sucitto. When we are angry, brothers and sisters, please do not talk. An angry mind can think, so can a calm mind. But the thoughts are all different. Thinking before we speak ensures that we examine our intentions first. It allows us to recognize the telltale signs and show that we are ready or not ready for conflict. So what do? Remember this? The reflections? You should be very familiar with this slide. Watch out for, at the present moment, you have to watch out for certain signs. For example, physical reactions like this. Tightness in your jaw, tension in your limbs or body, shallow or rapid breathing, flushes of heat, sweating, or cold. And for your mental, the signs are feeling of unease and discomfort, a feeling of heaviness, and an urge to protect, explain, or defend yourself. Here, the non-verbal cues, right, like facial expressions and body language, will show our aversion and our readiness for conflict. So that's physical. And when you look at the mental, you will feel a heaviness of the mind. You recognize ill will, hatred, and anger. All right? The unwholesome roots are taking place. Then we abandon it. This means letting it go. Okay? Then you say, Sister Siew Fong, how do we do that? Okay, we have do Vipassana practice. I'm going to show you this. First, you have anger. Okay? And normally, harsh speech comes from anger. Anger is an aspect of dosa or aversion that arises when something we want is not satisfied, right? So we either can choose to participate in anger or observe the anger. When we participate in the anger, we fall in line with our emotions and let it carry us away. Observing anger means watching the nature of this energy, which you define as anger. By doing this, you cut yourself off from the source. I am angry is a subjective observation where this sense of self plays a central role. Now, this is anger. It is an objective without identifying anger as I, mine, and self. And you recognize that it is your response that causes you to be angry, right? And you're able to hold back. When your ego is big and you take things personally, you will have the I am angry, and therefore it's harder. You blame external sources for your anger. And even if you know that the anger originates from within you, it's very much harder to let it go. Then what do? You let anger be, suppress anger, or replace anger with positive mental states. This is what you do. You let anger be, and you think of something positive. Now, where we are with regard to the Four Noble Truths in this whole process, eventually everything here is dukkha, isn't it? Suffering, because everything here are conditioned states, and all conditioned states are dukkha because they are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and non-self. Anger arises due to causes and conditions. So you see the first noble truth. This is anger, right? But seeing anger as anger, you see suffering, not personal. Second noble truth is the energy of craving. The craving for sense pleasure, craving for being, and craving for non-being. Things did not go the way you want. You have anger and craving for what things should be. Then there's a third noble truth here. Cessation of suffering comes when cause and condition that supports the craving no longer exist. You let anger be. See anger as anger and not get personal. Anger will fade. Suffering is allowed to fade on its own without any participation from the observer. Do not feed the narrative of the mind. And then you practice right effort and replace anger with positive mental states. And that is the fourth noble truth. This practice will involve, right? You have right view, right thought, right effort, right concentration, and mindfulness, yes? So we are looking at the Four Noble Truths at a level that can be applied in everyday life. This is Vipassana training. Hard to do if you do not meditate, if you do not see the mind and feel the mind and know what the mind is. And therefore, it is very easy to be reactive. So meditation helps you to pull the mind back. You be sensitive to the mind. So even before you get angry, you are already very aware. So this is what the Buddha means when he said to abandon, to remove, to do away with, and annihilate ill will. Tolerance requires patience. Learning to tolerate blame and criticism from others, to sympathize with their shortcomings, to respect differences in viewpoints, to ensure abuse without feeling compelled to retaliate. I mean, when I say ensure, it's like to endure that abuse. Actually, it's not even endurance. You see when someone is angry with you, that person is suffering. It is always the present action that we have the last control over because we are habitually unmindful of our actions. Wise reflection reminds us to listen mindfully, not to judge, and to sense the needs of others. It allows us to restrain ourselves from harming others with harsh speech. So whether we speak or not boils down to two just factors, right? Do you still remember the summary of this? No matter what you do, please don't harm yourself and please do not harm others. Next, becoming a virtuous person, right, is not like riding a bicycle. It does not mean that once you learn how to do it once, and then you expect to ride that moral conviction with no difficulty for the rest of your life. Instead, skillful behavior is something you have to decide to do over and over and over again. And the more moral reminders you have in your life that reinforce your commitment, the more regularly you bring up these reminders, the easier it is to stay on the path. I have touched on moral reminders at length already under forced speech. So today, just a gentle reminder. Now, this is one most Buddhists remember by heart. The other is the recollection of the 5 precepts. We can also create our own moral reminders, what some people call personal manifestos, like declaration of values that are important to use. For example, you like this word called character is power, and you have the words written somewhere on your notice board. Or we can wear jewelry like the Bodhi tree or have a lotus flower in your room. Now, in his book, The Honest Truth About Dishonesty, Professor Dan Ariely demonstrated the importance of moral reminders by retelling a story found in the Talmud. Now, it's about a religious man who went to visit a prostitute. Talmud means a collection of ancient writings of Jewish religious laws. You can read this on your own. Moral reminders will force us to do the right thing. They just, it won't really force you to do the right thing. They just prompt you to reflect on your values and give you the strength to resist temptations. Why do you think people attend church, go for prayers at the mosque, and gather weekly at pubs? It is not just to meet spiritual friends. Now you know why we have to keep company with admirable friends and wise ones? Because we live in an era where harsh speech and profanity are very common. We see and read in books, magazines, and on the social media where people just do not exercise right speech. Also in movies, in the music industry, and from others around us. In some movies, you see couples quarrel passionately, right? And then they make up passionately. So a lot of people think that such passion is very good. But that is just entertainment, just a make-believe. But in real life, it is hardly a happily ever after when couples quarrel with such passion. Unfortunately, the more we get exposed to this kind of influence, we think it is okay to use harsh speech. But as Buddhist practitioners, we should know that it is never too late to abandon harsh speech. So we have to keep close to our spiritual friends and wise ones who will influence us in the right way. So next, rationalization. If your speech is rough, hard, and hurtful, offensive, and provokes anger, then it is harsh speech no matter how you look at it. Rationalization is, in truth, a form of self-deception by reasoning. Before we even try to justify any form of harsh speech, we should ask ourselves this, whether we are in a position to practice nigeha or justified rebuke of wrongdoing. Rebuke of wrongdoing. To know whether we have qualified, we should use Buddha's guidelines for his monks. What are the 5 things we have to make sure we possess? Number 1, bodily behavior that is irreproachable. Number 2, verbal behavior that's irreproachable. Number 3, a mind of loving kindness. Number 4, that we are learned and we practice what we preach. And number 5, we must practice right speech. We saw earlier that to have effective communication, we need to listen mindfully and remain objective so we do not judge, which means we have to cultivate mindfulness. It does not come naturally to us. We have to meditate. To develop what we call mind muscles, when we meditate regularly, with stronger mind muscles, mind endowed not will not get so easily disturbed and is less reactive, less impulsive. We are better at keeping present moment awareness. So you become mind controls thoughts and not thoughts control mind. And most people live life in accordance with the impact the thoughts have on their mind. So if they don't want to get angry, but they still get angry and get carried away with the narrative of the mind. Only then can we have mindful presence that allows us to observe the actual process of communication, our speech, our listening, even our inner world of thoughts and perceptions and emotions. Mindfulness also helps us remember the tools we have learned. We can hear or read everything the Buddha taught about right speech. But if we can't remember the teachings and do not practice, then they will not do us much good. And meditation increases compassion in us, which is very useful in conflict resolution. Now, by participating in talks organized by Babs, already covers 3 of these 10 meritorious deeds. The rest are also important, and we know their importance in the abstinence from divisive speech, right? I've covered these. Apart from restraint, we also have to learn to tolerate blame and criticisms from others, to sympathize with their shortcomings, to respect differences in viewpoints, to handle abuse without feeling compelled to retaliate. Not easy to abstain from harsh speech. That's why it is called skillful speech. And you need a lot of patience, a lot of time, and a lot of patience to get it right. We shall see how we conduct such speech under the doing good part later in the year. Remember that our drama training is a very gradual one. You cannot expect to improve overnight. You have to work towards harsh speech, bit by bit. All right, so this is the end of my Dharma sharing. Let me stop screen share. Okay, any questions?
Yes, we have 2 already.
Okay.
Okay, let me read out the first one. I hope I understand the first one correctly. But just let me read it out first. Let's say someone has a really bad habit, an addiction, let's say, or a serious health problem like obesity. Everyone in their circle is telling them what they want to hear. Let's say someone doesn't. The recipient feels it's harsh to tell the truth about it. So they get excited and angry. The other people in the group feels it's harsh. So how do we know what is harsh in this situation?
You're saying that as a group and you tell someone that you have a food addiction and you should lose weight, or that you're fat? Is that what the question is? Now, it really depends on, in a social setting, don't criticize another in a group, because that is rough, isn't it? It's harsh speech and it's offensive to the recipient. So you can tell a person she's overweight and should look after her health in private. What's your intention? Your intention is what? Your intention is you're concerned about her high blood pressure, her diabetes, and you tell that. Speak with kindness. Speak at a time when she's open to advice. Don't tell her that she should be watching what she eats when she's eating and enjoying the food. So it's not the right timing. So I hope I've answered your questions. because from the questions, it would appear that you're talking about a group social setting.
Or,
Next.
yeah, or is it a group and one person in that group doesn't feel what the others are thinking?
As long as in the social setting, don't criticize.
Okay.
Yeah, the recipient is not asking for it. Don't do it. Do it in private because it's rough. It's offensive to her. You tell her she is fat in front of other people. You think she can meditate later? No. It's harsh speech. Okay. So I have another question here that asks, why is suppressing anger wrong view? It's wrong view. When you suppress anger, you still have anger. Correct? You are just 自己苦. You tahan, you nuna, but anger is still there. And the narrative of the mind is still there. There's still judgment. It's just one time. The next time you communicate with the person again, something like this happen again, you blow. That's why that's called emotional baggage. That's the reason why in husband and wife relationship, right? I'm a family lawyer, so I can share this with you. It's like you always have clients telling me that, he did this. Then I would ask, why did you not raise it then to share with your husband or your wife how you feel? They will say, no, I didn't want to quarrel. I just take it. So all this suppression will lead to something, an explosion sometime in the future. That is not resolution. You still have ill will in you. Okay? Cannot. Remember last week? Easy to forgive, but not easy to forget. Yeah, so don't suppress. Deal with it. Knowing that anger comes within you, comes from your reaction. See anger as anger. Let anger dissolves. Use the Dhamma. When anger suppresses, then you'll be able to talk to the other person without risking a quarrel. Sometimes harsh speech is very subjective. As to me, it's just constructive suggestion, even said in polite way. But to the other person, it might be harsh. What do you think, sister? No. Okay, you have to be very mindful, right? You need to speak at the right time. If you don't speak at the right time, okay, no matter how good and how kind your words are, it may be offensive. Speak only if it's beneficial, all right, to that person. If it's not beneficial, speak it for what? Even if you're telling the truth, you have the best intention. It must be beneficial to the other party, all right? By telling the other party that your clothes are not very fashionable. Hello, I mean, really, that's his style, correct? Now, are you speaking kindly? That means you speak with good intentions and kind thoughts, right? And are you telling the truth? So there are many things that you have to consider. So it's not subjective. Just go with Buddha's definition of harsh speech. It has to be rough, right? What else? Is it hard? Is it offensive to others? Is it hurtful to others? Is it provoking anger? Is it unconducive to concentration? I mean, you can say things very nicely. Hey, brother, hey, your style are not so nice now, not so relevant already. Now people they wear tighter t-shirts. I mean, hey, it's offensive to your friend, is it not? He thinks there's nothing wrong with the way he dresses. So harsh speech is not subjective. You just adhere to the definition, you cannot go wrong. Okay, no questions. I've shared this last week, right? A lot of relationship between husbands and wives, right? There's a lot of harsh speech exchange between spouses because they take each other for granted, a lot for granted. Like, for example, I have clients who complain to me that, I'm fine, I'm at home, I do my stuff, and then he comes back. And then and he just doesn't look happy, okay? And I have male clients coming to tell me that, Miss Fu, I work so hard, I come back home, I open the door, and I look at my wife, and she looks pissed. Now, remember, speech is communication, and it can also be through facial expression. So let's say, for example, your spouse come back home and open the door. Do you greet your spouse with a smile? And hi, how's your day? And look happy to see your spouse? Or it was just like, because there's already a lot of judgment, suppression of anger, emotional baggage. So the facial expression is like, you know what I'm saying or not? So you expect your spouse to come back home looking happy. So it's a reactive. So one will get defensive, and the negative energy just feed each other. So if you adhere to the definition of what the Buddha says, then you will understand why there are quarrels in the household. Because when you take each other for granted, and it's in the home, right? So you're not so mindful, right? Then after watching YouTube or watching TV, and then when your spouse says, "Hey, don't watch, come, let's eat, let's do this. Ayah, don't disturb lah, you know. Ayah, don't disturb me. I'm doing something." So the mindfulness is just thrown out the window, and people just practice mindfulness outside the home, in your workplace, with your colleagues and clients, but not in the home. So we start at home. Speak very kindly, abstain from all those that, during Dhamma bites, falsehood, harsh speech, divisive speech, and idle chatter. Yes.
Just another question. Yeah.
Am I right to say that the root of all harsh speech is ego, self-control, therefore all kilesa? Yes! The sense of I. So a lot of people don't look inward, right? Blame the other person. You caused me what? Anger arises within you. Outside are just external circumstances. It's just the conditions. You can choose to be angry, to react angrily, or you can choose not to. And when you're angry, remember last week's talk, two things, due to your unmet needs. Right? Your needs are not met, or things don't happen the way you want to. All comes back to I. So if you can understand this, you can not hurt your own mind. You know, when you meditate for a while, you were so sensitive to your mind. Do you know the energy of anger is very heavy. Very heavy. You're suffering, but you don't know it. But when you have meditated and you've gone to samadhi, you will realize how light the mind is. So free, so peaceful. The mind is completely at rest. Why hurt yourself? And if you continue to be angry all the time, the ego is very big, all right? You don't practice. So every time you get angry, use harsh speech, scold this person, someone rude to you, you're rude back. You don't train, so this becomes your habitual karma. So the mental state, the mental energy is usually quite heavy. So upon death, what do you think is going to happen? Mind and body separates, right? Remember, I'm the master of my own karma. When mind and body separates, I'm talking science here. Mind, very heavy, right? You think go up to the higher realm or go down to the lower realm? I'm talking about mental energy. I'm using science. So anger, ill will, the sense of ego, that pride. The mind is usually more busy, more cluttered, and is usually heavier. So when your ego is very big, when things don't happen the way you want it, when things are not the way you desire, you react very fast. Very fast. Very hard for egoistic person to empathize also. And when someone is talking, your reaction will be, hey, shouldn't be like that, shouldn't be like that. The mind is really always jumping into the future. A lot of judgment in the mind. Yes. How can we encourage younger people to have realistic expectations about the future without being harsh? I find there are often nice people who are spreading unrealistic ideas and harsh people who are crushing people's dreams. Okay, this is very wide. Okay, let's talk about kids first, our children first. Now, I think we should look after our family first, okay? Now, to influence your kids, all right, to have realistic expectation about the future, it's not easy, because if you are, okay, let's say, for example, I usually go to a restaurant and see parents with children, and the children normally would be on their phones because they don't really like to have conversations with parents. And then, okay, and then when they're eating and doing this and that, you will see conversations like, hey, shouldn't, shouldn't like that. Eat more of this. You see, when parents will have a lot of attachment, right, to their children, so there are a lot of concerns and expectations. You must find the right time to talk to them, because if you're just going to talk to them like you normally would, they will not listen. Period. It's just like they have a mental block. They will see it as like nagging. So you must find the right time to talk to the children about the future. The right time is very important. Not when they're busy doing something, or they just come back from a party where they're distracted. It's a challenge. Being a parent is already very difficult. So you must find the right timing, and you must speak and you must practice active listening. More often than not, when parents speak to kids, they don't listen. So the child will be like, oh, mama, this is this. You listen without interjecting. Most parents would just interject, and the child will be already defensive. So to be able to communicate effectively, let him or she talk. She can go on for 15 minutes and 20 minutes, and you listen very, very mindfully. After you have listened, the feelings of that child will be validated. Only then will he or she open up her mind to receive and consider your point of view. So this is just a tip. And then the other questions is like, nice people who are spreading unrealistic ideas and harsh people are crushing people's dreams. There are people outside. What they do is their karma. Your response determines your own karma. Okay? And the Buddha says, right, if you react with anger, you are punishing yourself for another person's mistakes. So we be wise. We protect this mind. This mind life to life. Huh? Hi sis, if someone, Mr. A, asks our opinion on someone, Mr. B, whether on his or her habits or act, if we commented based on what I see, whether good or bad, the bad that we comment, is it considered harsh speech? It's divisive speech. It's not harsh, but divisive. Huh? So we must be very, very careful about what we say. If that someone A asking me, because someone A is going to do business, and someone A is a very good friend of mine. If I know about something about C, and it has to be truthful, remember the fourth, it has to be truthful, I will say that, look, I do not know the person well, okay, truthfully, but what I heard, okay, from another source is this. So you must be, maybe you want to find out more before you enter into the business deal with the other person. So it's a question of the closeness of your relationship with the person asking you for your opinion. Okay, is it in confidence? All right, and be very mindful of what you say. It has to be objective, it has to be the truth. If you heard it from someone else, qualify it. Okay, very important, because it can be divisive speech. As a divorce lawyer, what is your opinion of marriage? Is it being single or better choice? 有执着就有苦了，当然啦。So it doesn't mean that when you are married, it will be happily ever after. That's only in movies. That's the reason why they always show you the Thai lakon, the Chinese drama, and the Korean serials. They will show you the courtship, and end the show the moment the couples get married. They don't show you what happened after that. So when you are finding a spouse to marry, finding the right person. But we also have to understand that no one same person step into the same river twice. So people can change. It's either for the better or for the good. So marriage, in a sense, is a gamble, right? But if both of you are aligned in values and spirituality, all right, you have something to hold you together. And knowing that marriage is not about feelings, we know that feeling is just one of the 5 aggregates, right? Feelings changes through time. Okay, so you don't marry someone because I'm so in love. The love is just a feeling, it's transient, it changes. So one day you got promoted, you're very happy, you come back home. Then your husband watch TV. You don't mind, watch TV, don't help out in housework, never mind. You love him so much that day. Or another time when you come back home and you quarrel with your best friend, you're so upset. You step into the house, your husband is watching TV, not helping the housework. There will be a quarrel for sure. So marriage is not about feelings. Marriage is about a commitment. You find someone that you can call 家人. Okay? So getting the right view of marriage is very important. Number two, my tip is this. Don't marry unless you can find someone who can make you kinder and can make you more compassionate. Then you know that you married a good person. Yeah. Yeah. I think I've answered all questions.
Yeah. Brothers, sisters, do you have any more questions? Okay, I think that's all for
Okay, good.
today. So, Sister
All right.
Super, could you lead us in the sharing
Okay.
of the merits? Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Hands in Anjali, quieten down your mind. Quieten down your mind. By the grace of this merit that I have acquired by our puja, short meditation, and learning of the Dhamma, may I never associate with the foolish, but only the wise up to the time I attain final happiness. By the grace of whatever merits that I have acquired, may these be helpful to eradicate the defilements and overcoming all suffering. May all the merits I have accumulated today be shared with my departed relatives. May they be well and happy, and may they continue in the path towards the eradication of suffering. By the power of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, may all the devas protect me, and may they be blessings to me. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.